Today we are going to plan and budget for a trip to Disneyland. We'll go over what hotels you can stay at. Do you want to stay on property or off property, and what are the benefits of each? We'll talk about the park tickets. How many days should you go? Do you need the park hopper ability, and do you need Genie Plus? We'll go over the airports you can fly into, and then we'll do some budgeting on how much food will cost per person. So let's get this trip planned and into your calendar so you can enjoy your vacation. We have a lot to go over here, so let's get to it. The first step for any trip is to decide which days to go. Think of these as your target dates, and I say target dates because parts of your trip could affect other parts. So you're going to want your flights and your hotel and your park reservation days all to work out perfectly together before you book any one piece. Disneyland uses a demand-based pricing structure, so days where they think it will be crowded, they increase the price. So holidays and weekends, it's more expensive for a single day park ticket. And what this has been doing is it's having locals visit on the lower cost days, which are weekdays. So this past year, there have been many weekend days that were less crowded than a Tuesday or Wednesday of that same week. So this is making it very hard to predict Disneyland crowd levels when you're planning a trip. Another thing to know is that Disneyland is considered a locals park, so the crowd levels can fluctuate a bit with the local schedules. So one thing you can look at are the Los Angeles and Orange County area school calendars. So when the schools have a day off, the parks tend to be a bit busier. So you can find those calendars on the school district's website. I put links to those websites down in the description so you can take a look there and see when their winter, spring, and summer breaks line up with the dates that you're selecting for your trip. The other thing to look at, which might be more important than the school calendars, are the annual pass holder calendars, which are now called Magic Keys. So since this is a locals park, the majority of the visitors are Magic Key holders, and a lot of them are blocked out of the parks for a lot of days out of the year. But it's not just about the days they're blocked out of the parks, it's also about the days they can return after being blocked out for a long period of time. So for example, the lowest cost Magic Key is blocked out all of June, all of July, and they can return this year on Monday, August 12th. So you can pretty much guarantee that August 12th will be a very crowded day. When you're a Disneyland fan and you're blocked out for 2.5 months, you're going to return as quickly as you can to get your Disney fix. So I put a link down in the description for the Magic Key calendar so you can take a look at those. The last thing I want to mention is to be aware of parties like Sweethearts Night, Grad Nights, and Oogie Boogie Bash, which is a Halloween party. These types of parties are paid events and they usually close down one of the parks early that night. And this can cause a few things to happen. The park with the party could end up being more crowded that day because people will go to that park and then stay for the party that they paid for. And the park without the party could end up being more crowded at night when all the non-party goers get pushed from the party park to the non-party park. So you'll just want to be aware of those events. The one problem here is if you book your trip like way out in advance, you won't know the dates of these yet, but Grad Nights are usually quite a few nights in May and then the beginning of June, and then Oogie Boogie Bash is most of September and October. So just be aware that those things are happening at that time. So using all of that information, for my example trip that I'm building in this video, I'll be choosing August 1st through August 5th. So those are my target dates. And one important thing to know before moving on is that no matter what dates you select for your trip, you should always expect it to be crowded. That way, if it is crowded, it's what you expected and you'll be ready for it. So the next thing to look into are your flights. If you're driving, then you can probably skip this section, but be sure to budget for how much gas will cost you to drive there and back. So the two airports that most people will fly into are LAX and John Wayne. John Wayne is Orange County Airport, and it is the closest airport to Disneyland. Since it's a big airport, all the major airlines will fly in and out of there. So depending on the time of day you arrive, it'll take you about 20 minutes up to an hour to drive from John Wayne to Disneyland. LAX is a huge airport, so you'll find the most flight options going in and out of there. You'll probably find the cheapest flight options too, going to LAX versus John Wayne. However, LAX is not very close to Disneyland. It is way over on the coast, and depending on the day and time you arrive, it could take you 35 minutes up to 2 hours to get to Disneyland. And remember that any flight savings you save going to LAX versus John Wayne, you might just be taking that money that you saved and putting it towards a more expensive ground transportation because it's a lot further drive to Disneyland versus John Wayne. So you got to kind of weigh the two there. Another airport to consider is the Long Beach Airport. It is a small airport that is very easy to get in and out of. However, since it is so small, the airlines are very limited. Right now it's just Southwest Airlines, and then there's one Delta flight that comes in and out of Salt Lake City. But I do think Long Beach Airport works great for people who rent a car and they want to avoid the Los Angeles freeways. So if you fly into Long Beach Airport, you can take the freeways, that'll be fine, but there is another non-freeway path that's very direct to Disneyland. When you drive out of the Long Beach Airport, you'll be on East Wardlow Road, and you just stay straight on that road, and it turns into Ball Road, and you just keep going straight, and then you'll take a right on Disneyland Drive, and it'll take you right to the parking garage or the Disneyland Hotel area. So it's all a straight path, no freeways, and you only take one turn right at the end of your drive. So that one works out great, and if you take that path, it'll take you between 25 minutes up to an hour depending on traffic. So with all of these airports, just be aware of the time you arrive. If you arrive to any of these on a weekday between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m., it's going to take you a lot longer to get to your hotel because of traffic. So for my example trip, I'll be flying into John Wayne Airport. The cost for my 4 flights is $1,624. So I'll add that to my spreadsheet, and then we can add it all up at the end. So once your flight arrives, you need to get to your hotel. So you can use a rideshare app, a taxi, or maybe you rent a car because you're going to other places beyond the Disney parks. So you'll want to get the price of those and put them into your budget. For things like Uber, you can open that app up right now from home and then just put in your airport and the hotel that you're going to be visiting and get the price. I just did that, so for John Wayne to the Disneyland Hotel, it will cost between $32 and $42. So you throw in a tip, round up a little bit, and that'll put you at $50 to get to your hotel and then $50 back to the airport at the end of your trip. One other expense that can be easily forgotten is your airport parking or rideshare from your house to your local airport. Unless you have a family member dropping you off, you're most likely going to be paying for one of those services. So you'll want to add that into your transportation budget. For my example trip here, I'll be taking an Uber from John Wayne to the hotel, so that's $50 there, and then $50 back. For the local airport, we'll have a family member drop us off to save a little money there. So I'll be adding $100 to my ground transportation budget. So let's get to the park tickets. So during the ticket buying process, you are going to be faced with a lot of choices. Things like how many days do you want to go? Do you want a park hopper? Do you want Genie Plus? And more. So I think the best way to go through this information is to just jump into the ticket buying process, and then we'll talk about all of the topics as they come up on the screen. So we go to the official Disneyland site, and then we're going to go to Parks and Tickets up at the top, and then we'll click Theme Park Tickets. And then the first thing it's going to ask is to select your ticket. So right now it already has the standard theme park ticket selected. That's what I'll be using, but you want to look at these other options here because they do have some limited time deals that you may qualify for. These two here are Southern California resident offers, so if you don't live in Southern California, then you won't qualify for those offers. But I have seen some like child ticket offers and stuff like that, so you'll want to keep an eye on those to see if you do qualify. But I'm going to choose standard theme park ticket. And then the next thing we have to choose is to select the number of days. So how many days do we want to be in the parks? There are a lot of ways to do a Disneyland vacation. There are 2 parks to visit, so you might think that 1 day in each park is good enough, but I think you need at least 3. I prefer 4 days. Let's say you only have 1 day at Disneyland and your favorite attraction is down or the line is super long, and so you skip it for now, and you get to the end of the night and you realize you never went back to that attraction. And then the next day you're at the other park and you don't have a park hopper pass to get back over. So for this trip, you missed out on that attraction. So that's why I like having a 3rd or 4th day to help resolve some of those kinds of issues and help you get through your vacation to-do list. So to me, I prefer doing 3 days or 4 days if your schedule and budget allows it. So let's go ahead and choose 4 days. So I chose that, and now it's asking to select the number of tickets. So anyone in your group who's over the age of 10 is considered an adult, according to the ticket buying process. So kids are ages 3 to 9. For my family of 4, we are all over the age of 10, even though we don't always act like it all the time. So I'm going to choose 4 right there. And then now we have to select our ticket type. So right now we have a 1 park per day ticket, which means you start your day off in that park and you're there all day and you end your day in that same park. Or we can upgrade to a park hopper where you can start the day in 1 park and then hop back and forth all throughout the day. Just know that park hopping, you have to stay in your starting park until 11 a.m. And once it hits 11 a.m., then you can hop back and forth for the rest of the day. If you aren't familiar with the Disneyland Resort layout, park hopping is a great benefit to have. Both parks are right next to each other, so you can park hop back and forth very quickly and easily. For example, the walking distance from the Pirates of the Caribbean in Disneyland over to Radiator Springs Racers in DCA is only 0.62 miles. So you can walk that in 10 to 15 minutes, or maybe 20 minutes if you get distracted by a churro, which is known to happen. So my family does a lot of park hopping for lunches or dinners. So we'll be at Disneyland and then we want to do lunch at Lamplight Lounge in DCA. So we'll hop over there, we'll have some lunch, go on a few rides if the wait times look good, and then we'll hop back over to Disneyland whenever we feel like it. So we treat it as if it were one big park. So I would recommend getting Park Hopper on your tickets. I think it's worth it, but it's up to you if you want to spend the extra money on that benefit. So the Park Hopper price varies depending on how many days you have. So if you did a 1 or 2 days, it is $65 per ticket. 3 or 4 is $70 per ticket, and 5 days is $75 per ticket. So I'll be doing 4 days, so I'm going to select 4, and then I'll select Park Hopper. So $70 per ticket, so times 4, that's $280 that it will cost to add Park Hopper to my trip. So one thing to point out that the Park Hopper is all or none, so you're not putting it on per day. So once I add it, it's $70 per ticket, and that's all 4 days. It's not adding up each day $70, it's $70 for that entire 4-day ticket. So you're not gonna have a Park Hopper for day 2, but not 3 or 4 or anything like that. So it is all or none. And so we have that set, so we're gonna click that and we're gonna hit continue. And then now you can see we have a subtotal in the upper right corner of our browser. And so right now our park tickets are costing $2,060. So now we have to reserve our ticket dates. And at first glance, this looks pretty confusing. So let's go ahead and try to clear this up a little bit. In the past, you could just buy your ticket and show up on whatever day you wanted and start your day in whatever park you wanted. It's not that way anymore. You have to reserve the park for the day you're going to be there. And if you have a Park Hopper ticket, you have to reserve which park you're going to start your day in. So the calendar you're seeing here shows you the parks that you can reserve dates for and also which parks you can start your day in. If you see a day that has a slash through it, that means that no reservations are available, so you can't choose that day. I don't see any here. So let's go ahead and go out to our target dates. So for this was what, August? It was August 1st through the 5th for this example trip here. And we can see on all those dates that we have both icons here. So the pink castle is the Disneyland park is available, and then the blue Mickey Fun Wheel or Pixar Pal around there, that is the DCA, showing that DCA is available. So on all of our dates, both parks are available. So the other thing here is if you have the kind of trip with a rest day in the middle, this is where you would kind of choose those. So you would say, oh, I'm in the parks Friday and Saturday, and then Sunday the 4th is a rest day, and then I'm going on the 5th and the 6th. So then my 4-day tickets are Friday, Saturday, Monday, Tuesday. So then this is where you'd kind of plan out your rest day. But since I don't have that, mine would be like this. So I'm planning on flying in on Thursday, so I won't be in the parks. So my first park day will be Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then my last park day will be Monday. So those are my 4 park days. So I will select those, and then I'm going to hit continue. And then now we have to select our starting park. So this isn't just the starting park for your first day. This is a starting park for each day of your trip. So I have a 4-day pass, so I need to choose what park I'm going to start in for each of those days. So before selecting your starting park, there is one important piece of information that you need to know. And that is that guests staying on Disney property can get into one of the parks 30 minutes early each day. So this is a benefit that I'll go over more in the hotel section, but for now what you need to know is that the early entry for Disneyland is Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. DCA is Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays. So if you are staying on Disney property, then you have this benefit, and you might want to start your day in the early entry park to take advantage of that. If you're staying off property and you don't have early entry days, then you probably want to avoid the early entry park. And the thinking there is, if you go to the early entry park without the early entry benefit, even if you're right up at the front of rope drop, once that rope drops, you already have some people in front of you and in the lines. And remember, you can't park hop out of there until 11 a.m. So you may find yourself stuck in the more crowded park for the morning. But wait, we haven't got to the hotel section yet, so I don't know if we're staying off property or on property. And that is correct. So this is like what I talked about at the start of the video, where parts of the trip will impact other parts. So you have to figure everything out to make sure they all work well together before you book any certain section. So for this trip, I will most likely be staying off property, and I know that Disney's California Adventure is the early entry park for Friday, so I'm going to go ahead and choose Disneyland as my starting park to avoid that early entry since I don't have that benefit. And then on Saturday, I'll start at DCA. Sunday, we'll be back at Disneyland. And then Monday's a little different because DCA is the early entry park for both Sunday and Monday. So since this is my last day in the parks and it's a half day because I'll be traveling that night, I'm gonna go ahead and choose DCA as my starting park. That way I'll have 2 days starting in Disneyland and 2 days starting at DCA. So now that we have our starting parks selected, we're going to scroll down and hit continue. And then now it is asking if we want Disney's Genie Plus and a parking voucher. So let's start with the easier of these two, which is parking. If you have your own car or you're renting a car and you're planning on driving into the parks each day, then you are going to need to pay for parking. But you can pay for the parking here up front for $35 a day. So for my trip of 4 days, that will be $140 for my entire trip. But you can also pay in person the day of. So if you're unsure if you're going to be driving to the parks or not, it's going to be better to just wait and then pay when you do actually park. So now for the harder thing to go over, Genie Plus. So to go over all the ins and outs of Genie Plus would be its own 20 to 30 minute video. So I'll go over some of the highlights really as quickly as I can. So basically, Genie Plus is the service that you need to add on to your tickets to get lightning lanes for the attractions, and those used to be called fast passes. So let's say, for example, that during your day you get a lightning lane for Space Mountain and it says come back to Space Mountain between 1 and 1:45. So you go back to Space Mountain around 1 o'clock and you'll be able to go through the lightning lane, the faster lane, and then instead of the standby lane that might be 60 minutes or 90 minutes or whatever. So there are about 20 attractions across the whole resort that use lightning lanes that you can use the Genie Plus service for. So a couple of things to know about lightning lanes is that you can reserve a lightning lane once every 2 hours or once you have used a lightning lane. So in that example above, let's say you show up at 1 p.m. for Space Mountain and you check into the lightning lane, you can now book your next lightning lane. If one of your lightning lanes is way far out, which happens a lot, let's say it's 5 hours from now, well, after 2 hours have passed, then you can get another lightning lane. So in that scenario, you would actually hold on to 2 lightning lanes in your plans. So the other catch that I am really not a fan of, like really not a fan of, is that you can only use a lightning lane for each attraction once per day. So if you got one for Space Mountain at 1 p.m. and you went on Space Mountain, you can't use Genie Plus to get a lightning lane for Space Mountain again that day. You can still go on Space Mountain again, but you'll have to wait in the standby line. So my family used to use fast passes all the time for the same attraction. Like we'd go on one ride 3 times with fast passes. So this was a huge little wrinkle in this system. So we don't like this one at all, but it's the system that we have, so we gotta just kind of deal with it. And I keep hoping they're gonna change it, but so far they haven't. One of the nice perks with Genie Plus is that it does include Disney's PhotoPass, so you get some of those the attraction pictures that they take when you're on the attraction, and you can also go up to the photo cast members and they'll take your picture, your family's picture in front of the castle and other cool places like that. So the last little complicated thing to talk about are the individual lightning lanes. So individual lightning lanes are different from lightning lanes. They're a separate cost that's outside of the Genie Plus service. So the rides that use individual lightning lanes can change, but as of right now, they are Rise of the Resistance at Disneyland and Radiator Springs Racers at DCA. So if you have the Genie Plus service and you want to go on these attractions using their lightning lanes, you have to purchase them separately. And if you don't have the Genie Plus service, you can still purchase these yourself separately. So they truly are outside of that Genie Plus service. So the cost for the individual lightning lanes, it ranges depending on the day. Usually it's about $15 up to $26, and that is per ticket. So let's say when I'm there, Rise of the Resistance is set to $25. So for my family of 4, I'll have to pay $100 to go on Rise of the Resistance using the lightning lane. So this is a classic example of how much is your time worth? So is it worth it to you to pay $100 to save 90 minutes of your time? There really is no right and wrong answer here. It really depends on your budget and what time constraints you have on your trip. There are tons of reasons where that would be worth it, and there's tons of reasons where that would be crazy. So the Genie Plus service is up to you if you want to add it to your ticket. In my opinion, it's probably worth it for people that don't visit Disneyland very often, because that type of visitor, their time is worth a lot. They don't want to spend time on their vacation waiting in lines, so it's probably worth the cost to save some time in some of the lines. If you do visit Disneyland frequently, then it's probably not worth it, because if you don't go on an attraction, you can just go on it when you visit again in 1 month or 2 months or however often you visit. So it's really up to you. Genie Plus is currently $30 per ticket per day. So for my 4 people with 4-day park hopper tickets, that's going to add $480 to my trip cost. Now you can decline Genie Plus right now and then add it to each day of your trip when you're there. Just know that the price of Genie Plus does fluctuate. So right now it's $30. When you get there, it could be $35 or $38. And then also, if you are on a super crowded day, the Genie Plus service could sell out, and then you might not be able to get it at all. So I know I'm going to use Genie Plus, so I'm just going to select it right now. And that way I don't have to stress about trying to add it to my tickets each and every morning of my trip. That sounds kind of stressful. And then for parking, I'm not going to have a rental car, so I don't have a need for parking. So I'm going to go ahead and skip that. So we scroll down and it shows you the current selections. So you can hit continue and it just kind of adds them up, puts them in your cart. And it just shows that it's a 4-day park hopper ticket with Genie Plus, and then it shows that I'll be there Friday, August 2nd, Disneyland, DCA, Disneyland, DCA. So it just kind of gives you a summary. So we're not going to go any further with this because we're not actually purchasing these yet. We were just getting the price for our budget. So we're going to put this $2,540 in our spreadsheet, and then we'll move on to other parts to budget for. And then when we have it all worked out, then we'll go ahead and purchase everything. Before getting to the hotels, let's talk about the food and souvenir budgets really quick. A lot of people don't consider the food budget on their trip, but it ends up being a huge part of the overall cost. Now, food can change from person to person, so I'm going to kind of stick with a breakfast, lunch, and dinner and snacks type food plan here. So for breakfast, that one's kind of hard to budget for because that's the one that everyone's really different on. So what I usually do is set that to $10 per person per day because I figure somebody's going to stop at Starbucks, and if you do that, you're almost at the $10 anyway. But if we stay at a hotel with a free breakfast, I'll eat there and that'll be free. Sometimes when the kids were little, we would do a character breakfast, which is the opposite of free, so you need to put that in your budget. And sometimes we're in a hurry to get to rope drop and we'll just have a protein bar or a granola bar and run to rope drop. So I think $10 per person per day is a pretty safe budget for breakfast. For lunch, we usually do like a quick service place for burgers, fries, and a drink, or maybe chicken tenders, fries, and a drink. So in this example, we'll go to the Hungry Bear restaurant. So we can pull up the menu for the Hungry Bear and we'll get the burger and fries, and that is $13.29. And then we'll need to add a fountain drink to that, and that adds $4.59 to it. So that lunch is now at $17.88. But to get it a little more exact, we'll add the 7.75% sales tax to it, and that puts it up at $19.26. So it's safe to kind of round up there and say that our lunch budget is $20 per person per day, because most of the people in my family will probably get something very similar to that. So $20 per person per day sounds pretty good for lunch. Now for dinner, we usually do a sit-down restaurant. We don't do it every night, but if we did do a sit-down restaurant, we like the Lamplight Lounge at DCA, and 2 people in my group really love the lobster nachos. So let's say we get 2 of those. Those are $25 each. Let's say one of us gets the burger and fries. That's $25. And let's say one of us is looking at that lemon rosemary chicken, looks good, and that's $26. So you add all that up, and that dinner is $101, but that didn't include any drinks yet either. So let's say we're just keeping it with the fountain drinks. So we'll add 4 fountain drinks on there that are $4.59 each. And then we add tax and a tip, and that's gonna put us at about $150 for that dinner. Now, if you divide that by 4, that's $37.50 per person. So we could set that as our budget for dinner, but since I know we won't go to sit-down restaurants every night, and if we do, we might do like split the lobster nachos or something. So I'm going to lower that to $30 per person per day. I feel like that's probably more like what my family would do. So, and one thing about sit-down restaurants is that you can make reservations for them 60 days in advance. So once you have your trip booked, you set a timer on your phone or set an alarm on your phone, and then 60 days out, you can start booking your sit-down reservations. So the other thing that you might not think about are the snacks and treats and drinks that you get, when you're walking around on your day. So I usually like to get a churro when the churro stand opens, and that's $5.75 now. And then after lunch, it's nice to get some kind of sweet treat. Let's say I get a Dole Whip that I believe is up to $6.25 or something like that. And then after lunch or after dinner and before park closing, maybe go get ice cream or a Mickey ice cream bar. So let's say that each treat that I get, 3 that day, is $6 each. So that's $18. And then we got to think about drinks, because there's a lot of times where I'll buy a bottle of water or a bottle of Sprite or something like that. And those are about $5 each. So let's say we get 2 of those outside of our meals. So that puts the snack budget, those three treats and the 2 drinks, at $28. So it's probably $28 per person per day for the snacks. And the one thing to think about too is this was all just with fountain drinks and stuff. If you do a lot of the alcoholic drinks, if you buy something at Oga's or at DCA, Lamplight Lounge, you get one of the cocktails, or maybe you buy a beer at DCA, you're gonna wanna budget that into the cost of your food budget too. So you total up the whole food section, and with my breakfast at $10 and my lunch at $20, dinner at $30, and the snacks and treats at $28. So that comes to $88 per person per day. So for my family of 4, for a 4-day trip, the total food cost will be $1,408. So as you can see, that is a huge part of the overall cost of the trip. So I know we could probably get that down. I'm sure my family doesn't quite get to that, because we do a lot of smaller snack lunches kind of things, where you go to Bengal Barbecue and you just get some of their skewers and kind of split them until you feel good enough. It's not like you want to overeat when you're going on all these rides. But you know your family better than me, so you can budget, change these numbers however you want to fit your family. So let's go over the souvenirs and merchandise really quick. So this is a hard one to budget for, because you never know what items you're going to find that you have to have. So my previous trips to Disneyland, it's usually pretty consistent with our merchandise spending. So my 2 kids usually get a hoodie and a t-shirt. So the hoodie's usually $60 to $70, and the t-shirt's $25 to $30. So that's about $100 for each of them. My wife always intends on buying a Disneyland t-shirt, but always finds that the women's t-shirts go through the Disney Bedazzler machine, and they come out all super sparkly and loud. So surprisingly enough, she usually spends $0 on merchandise, but let's say this is the trip where she finds the t-shirt that accidentally didn't go through the Bedazzler. So we'll give her a budget of $30. And for me, I usually buy a t-shirt. I'll buy a hoodie if I find one, and then I usually am attracted to these small metal shiny objects. Back here. So we're not gonna talk about pins, okay? We're just gonna leave those out of the budget for now. So pins aside, I'll still outspend everyone in my family. So let's put me at $150. Oh yeah, we'll put me at $150. So we take the 100, 100, 30, and 150, and that puts us at $380. So let's just round that up to $400 even, and we'll say that everyone in my family will spend $100 on merchandise. So you know your family, so you can adjust the money and go higher or lower for whatever you think your family will spend. So we made it to the hotel. So where are you going to stay? Are you going to stay on Disney property or off Disney property? So what are the benefits of each, and how close are all these hotels to the Disney parks? So we're going to go over all of that right now. So I saved this category for the end because the hotel you choose has the biggest impact of your trip budget. So the first thing to figure out is, do you want to stay on Disney property? And most people think, well, yeah, of course I do. So I understand that, but staying on property is a lot more expensive. So it really comes down to how much is worth to you to stay on property. So there is no right or wrong answer there. There are some trips where it just makes total sense, and other trips where it might not make as much sense. So let's take a look at the on-property hotel options. So the Disneyland Resort has 3 hotels that are on property. You have the Disneyland Hotel, the Grand Californian Hotel and Spa, and the Pixar Place Hotel, which used to be called the Paradise Pier Hotel. So the main benefit with staying on property is that you never have to leave that controlled Disney bubble. So when you're done with your day at the parks, you get to walk down through downtown Disney to your hotels. So with the Disneyland Hotel and the Grand Californian, you don't have to cross any streets, so your walk back to the hotel will be with good lighting and fun music, and it'll just kind of keep you in that vacation mood. The Pixar Place Hotel, it's very similar, but there are paths that you take where you will have to cross the street, but there is a path where you don't have to cross the street, but you do have to walk around this little roundabout that's kind of the entrance to some parking lots. So you may encounter some cars like entering and exiting those parking lots. So the other main perks for staying on property are early entry into the parks. So each day of your hotel stay, you can get into one of the parks 30 minutes early. So it used to be an hour early, which was awesome, and now it's been reduced to 30 minutes, which is less than awesome. It's still great to get in there early, but I feel like 30 minutes early, it's more like a rope drop fast pass now. So it does get you around all of those people waiting for the rope to drop. You can get on a few rides before they're let in. So the way this works is that Disneyland is the early entry park on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, and DCA is the early entry park on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays. So a couple of things to be aware of with early entry is that not all of the attractions, shops, or lands are open for this time. So I put a link down in the description that goes to the official site that goes through all the details of early entry. But basically for Disneyland, the things that are open are Fantasyland and Tomorrowland. And then over at DCA, there's quite a few attractions open and they're all spread out, but it's still not everything in the parks. And another very important thing to know is that you must have the early entry park reserved as your starting park for that day. So I went over more about that in the park ticket buying section of this video. Another cool perk is that if you're staying at the Grand Californian or the Pixar Place Hotel, both of those have dedicated entrances into DCA. So the Grand Californian entrance lets you into DCA right around the Grizzly River Run attraction, right back in that forested area, which is pretty cool. And then the Pixar Place Hotel has you cross the street and walk towards the Grand Californian, and then there'll be a gate that you can open up with your Pixar Place room key, and then you'll be on a path just to the south of the Grand Californian. It's got some trees and some music, and you just walk along that path to the security, and then you'll enter DCA in the Paradise Gardens area in between Corndog Castle and Seaside Souvenirs. So there are a lot of other perks for on-property hotel guests, and I put a link down in the description to the official site that goes over all of those perks. So you'll definitely want to take a look at that list, because what I think might be a small perk, you might think is a major perk. And remember that these benefits can change at any time, so you'll want to look at this list as your trip gets closer. Let's shift our focus to the off-property hotels. So there are a lot to choose from here, and each one will have its own benefits. So some might have a free shuttle that takes you to and from the parks. Others might have free parking or free breakfast, both which will save you a lot of money. But the main benefit here might be how close they are to the parks. It's great to have a hotel close to the parks, especially if you are going to take a midday break from the parks, or maybe you just don't want to have a long walk to your hotel after being on your feet all day. So if you are new to the Disneyland Resort, then you might assume that the on-property hotels are the closest ones to the parks, and that would make sense. However, that is not entirely true. Here you can see Disneyland and DCA, and that blue dot in the middle of the two parks marks the center of the Esplanade. So what I did was track the walking distance from each hotel's front door to that blue dot using Google Earth. The blue boxes are the 3 on-property hotels, and the red boxes are some of the off-property hotels that I have selected. The closest hotel to the park gates is the Grand Californian. If being close to the parks is your #1 goal, then you can't beat the Grand Californian. However, the next 11 closest hotels to the park gates are all off-property hotels. They're all of the ones that are right across Harbor Boulevard. So the closest is the Best Western Plus Park Place Inn, and almost the same distance is the Park View Inn. And then after that, the next closest hotel just alternates to the one below those two, and then the one above, and then the one below, all the way to the 13th closest hotel, which is the Disneyland Hotel. The furthest one that I have highlighted on this map is the Clementine Hotel and Suites. I've stayed there a few times, and that one is 0.77 miles from the park gates. I still consider that as being close, but everyone will have a different definition on what close is. So there are a lot more hotels further down Harbor Boulevard and to the south of DCA, next to the convention center, but these were just the ones I highlighted. Some people like to stay further down south on Harbor, and then you can just walk to the Toy Story parking lot and catch the tram to the parks. So there are a lot of options for you out there. The next question is, what will your walk look like from your hotel to the parks and back? So this is the Disneyland Resort entrance sign on Harbor Boulevard. If you walk under that, you will be on Disney property, but if you stay on this side of that sign, then you are on a public city street. So if we look across Harbor here, you can see the number 2 and number 3 closest hotels are right there. So you just have to cross Harbor Boulevard and you're at your hotel, super close. If you walk a little bit north on Harbor, you can see the Fairfield Inn, we have the Courtyard Anaheim right there, and then the Howard Johnson. And then if you go south from that Disneyland sign, you can see other options like the Grand Legacy right there, the Anaheim, and then on the Disneyland side of the street right here, we have the Candy Cane Inn. So there are a lot of choices on the corner of Harbor and Catella. I've stayed at the Hyatt House right there, and I thought it was great, and it's a good location too. In my experience walking in this area on my previous trips, I have walked by homeless people sleeping in various spots along the path. I've seen a street vendor selling these light up flying toys where they throw them in the air and they spin around and come back down. And then I've seen some suspicious activity over by the mini mart on Catella and Harbor. So those are the only things that I've personally seen on my trips. Pretty much the normal things you see on any city street. But if any of that seems a little uncomfortable to you, remember that you are hardly ever walking on these paths alone. There's usually a family or another group of park guests just right in front of you or right behind you going to their hotel. So I've never felt unsafe in this area, but you are on a city street, so I am alert. Right? You go from the on Disney property bubble where it feels very safe to a city street where you're ready. So I feel safe, but I'm ready. So after seeing all of that, I'm guessing that most of you would prefer to walk to and from the parks going through downtown Disney instead of walking on a public street, and I completely agree with you on that. But now we get to the main question. How much is that worth to you in terms of cost? Well, we're gonna find out right now. So, as with all hotels, the nightly cost fluctuates depending on the time of year and even the day of the week. So with all of these prices that I'm about to show you, these are for my example trip dates, which are August 1st through August 5th. So these will be hotel night stays on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights. And to make the comparison a little bit more even, I chose rooms that were all 2 queen-size beds, and I chose the nightly rate that was fully refundable instead of the cheap rate that wasn't refundable. I got the total cost from 22 off-property hotels and the 3 on-property hotels. The cheapest hotel I found was Hotel Lulu at $932. The only other one I found under $1,000 was Anaheim Desert Inn and Suites. The rest came in right around $1,000 to $1,500, and about 4 or 5 of them were between $1,500 and $2,000, with only one going over $2,000, which was the Courtyard by Marriott at $2,143. Then we get to the 3 on-property hotels, which is the Pixar Place at $2,655, Disneyland Hotel at $3,281, and the Grand Californian at $43.54. So now the question is, if I'm staying off property, how much more do I have to pay to stay on property? So I have this chart here with all of those costs worked out. You can pause it, take a screenshot, and that way you can zoom in, because this is going to be too small to see on a phone or anything like that. So for this example, I'm going to stay at the Hyatt House. I've stayed there before and I liked it. It's in a great location. And since it's right in the middle of this hotel cost list here, well, that'll be a good one to use for this example. And that is $1,255. The cheapest option for me to get to on property is the Pixar Place Hotel, and that will be $1,400 more than Hyatt House. But if I'm already going to spend the money to get on property, I would prefer to go one level up and go to the Disneyland Hotel, which would be $2,026 more than the Hyatt House. So then the question becomes, is staying on property and all the on-property benefits, is that worth the $2,000? That's really up to you on if you think that's worth it or not. For me, what I usually do is look at that $2,000 and think, what can I do with that? Maybe I just want to save that money. Maybe I can do a project around the house with that money, or maybe I can put it into other spots of the trip. Like maybe I would rather splurge more on food costs than the on-property benefits or something like that. So most of the time I don't feel it's worth it, but sometimes I do. So we have stayed on property, and it's usually for special occasions like a special birthday or special anniversary. And sometimes it's just fun to kind of go all out and stay on property. So now you know the cost of staying off property versus on property. So when you're selecting your hotel, you can choose which way you would like to go. Now that we have the cost of all the hotels, we can add in the totals from the other sections. So we have the airfare, ground transportation, park tickets, food, and merchandise. That all equals $6,072. So I can pick a hotel that I want from this list and then just add them together. Then when my family says, let's take a trip to Disneyland, I can look at these totals and get a really good estimate on how much that trip will cost. So for my family of four, a 4-day trip to Disneyland staying off property will be about $7,000 to $8,000. And if we want to stay on property, it'll be right around $9,000 and up to a little over $10,000. If everything in this video seemed very overwhelming to you, then you could use a Disney travel agent. There's a ton of them out there to choose from, and they'll be able to handle all these details for you. One thing to note, if you use a travel agency or a deal website, you are inserting a third party in the middle of your vacation bookings. So if you need to make any changes or any complications come up, you'll have to go through them to fix and not directly to Disney or the hotel you're staying at. So that could make things a little more complicated to get resolved. I always prefer to go direct to the hotels and to Disney, but I also enjoy everything in this video, and I find it all to be a fun little puzzle to put together and build my vacation. I know other people find this super stressful, and if it were up to them, they would probably end up just not going on the vacation. So then a Disney travel agency would be great for them. I know this video didn't go into plans for what to do while you're inside the parks, and that's because I feel that too much planning can ruin the experience. If you already have Genie Plus, you'll be directed to a certain attraction at a certain time of day and then another attraction at another time. So I think it's good to leave some space in the middle and just kind of go with the flow and see where the magic takes you. I hope you found this video helpful and you were able to budget and plan an amazing trip to the Disneyland Resort. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.